or neglectful home. And they can easily be picked up by the government in order to take them for their experiments. A lot of the experiments had to do with mind control in order to desensitize the mind, in order to teach them to torture. So some of the children and teenagers were taught to torture other people and animals.
That really just... I'm sorry. I have a dog that's near dying, so I didn't mean to be rude to you. This fell off the bed, so I had to pick him up. But, that really just upsets me like you wouldn't believe. I know back in the 50s when I was in grade school, they were doing a lot of testing with kids, like with the toothpastes and all that stuff. So here you're a kid, you're getting a free toothbrush and a bunch of toothpaste. But then I was reading later on, like some of the toothpaste it was radioactive, and they just wanted to see what would happen, to a certain amount of kids that got some radioactivity in their body, and see if they got sick or what type of diseases they came down with. All this stuff started coming out in the late 80s and late 90s. That, I wouldn't doubt the government would do something like that. But what you're saying, there's a lot of kids, young adults that are just disappearing and experimented on. That's just makes me, ooh, I thought that was pretty much over with, when the Nazi government collapsed.
Right. Well, the Nazis are increasing their, I don't know what to call it, their population, their uprising, but they're uprising in the Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
And it was recommended to me to research the different senators, United States senators, who were involved in that uprising and why. And so I did some research, and I do write in my book the different senators who fit the criteria of being invested in not only genetically modified foods being planted within the Ukraine, but also the uprising of the Nazis. And so I needed to find the link, and the link seemed to be eugenics. So, there's a lot of research that shows genetically modified foods are not safe.
No,
that our government, right, that our government claims they're safe, but the FDA has been bought. A lot of Monsanto's ex-employees work for the FDA, the USDA, thanks to Obama. And there's no, not only Obama, but Bush and Clinton. And there's no president, really, that really owns the Oval Office. Corporations own the Oval Office. So you can't really blame one president other than the fact that they sell out. And
well, I got a funny feeling when a president comes into office, they pretty much are sat down and explain this is how it is. And honestly, I think the president does have a lot of power, but I think on another side, they don't have a lot of power.
Right. If you look at Obama's presidency, and I am not a Trump supporter in any way, shape, or form, just kind of looking at the different presidents, if you look at Obama, he really sold out. He really sold out to Monsanto. But, aside from that, you have this company that is a huge corporation, just so much money behind them, and they're pushing genetically modified foods into the Ukraine. Well, the Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. So I had to research why is Monsanto so invested in getting their seeds into the Ukraine? Well, some of the research that I did linked to eugenics with the Nazis. And, a lot of what I write in Silent Whispers is really hard to believe. It's really hard to believe that Hitler didn't die at the end of the war, that the United States was involved in hiding him, along with Joseph Mengele. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but a major researcher who experimented on kids. He was fascinated with twins, fascinated with experimentation. He loved to change the color of people's eyes. So I talk a little bit about him and some of the kids who endured his experiments during the World War.
Yeah, I read a little bit about that the torture that it actually put his patients under. It was this enormous amount of pain and suffering before they would die.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, it's scary how one person or how a group of people or a government could even get themselves involved in doing something like that. But I think, honestly, like I said, even back then, I think you can't blame everything on Hitler. I think it was the group of, the people underneath him that was running the government the same way. I hate to say it. Like I said, in this country here, from what I have read, and I know somebody that used to be involved with the CIA years ago, and he explained to me a lot of things, like when they bring a president in, they sit him down and they tell him what the facts of life are, and they have to pretty much abide to those rules.
Right.
Yeah, I got a funny feeling if you didn't abide to what they were telling you to do, basically, you could maybe end up how Kennedy ended up.
Exactly. Right. So you could take Obama and you could say, well, that maybe they threatened his family. Maybe they did this. Maybe they did that. So I think that, last of the several presidents, Republican, Democrat, whatever, have sold out. They've sold out to the corporations who are ultimately in control. But aside from that, you have all of these children who are being tortured. And in the name of science, in order to experiment on prescription drugs, in order to experiment with mind control, teaching people how to torture others, it's disgusting and it's horrifying, and it's very sad to hear these stories from these kids, as young as 4 years old, 5 years old, who were forced to torture animals in order to change the state of their mind.
Oh, yeah. People get all upset when they take dogs in and, experiment on, dogs and animals and stuff like that. But I think going this next step and even thinking about doing it to a human is just totally insane. And, and when you get into like medications and stuff like that, sometimes I wonder if some of the medications they're coming out with might help temporarily. But sometimes I wonder if it is designed to basically shorten people's life for they're not going to live to 90 or 80. I got a funny feeling there's a group out there in the government that doesn't want an overpopulated world. So maybe they're researching on ways they can, do it humanely where, people at, a certain age, they, succumb.
Right.
So I don't know. Is this now you were mentioning about this one doctor that actually loved experimenting to change the people's eyes color and stuff like that. What was it? Do you know what the purpose for that was, or what he was thinking?
My understanding of this particular scientist is that he had a fascination with twins, and he had a fascination with changing eye color. And that he was just overall a very sadistic person who enjoyed torture and enjoyed bringing other scientists into the fold to also do his work for him. Now, in the research that I did, there are anecdotal reports that he was involved with MK Ultra. I believe that it's not secret that he didn't die at the end of the Second World War. I can't remember, but there are many reports that he escaped Nazi Germany at the end of the war, and that he was allowed to come through the United States, and that he was accidentally missed on the criminal charges list and then allowed to go to South America. There are other reports that state that he went to Canada, and there are definitely Canadians who talk about MK Ultra and how it expanded up into Canada.
Now, why don't you explain to the people out there what that organization actually is?
MK Ultra?
Yes,
So MK Ultra, from the research that I've done, it's just one name. So again, there's multiple labels for this particular, I don't know what to call it, group. But anyway, there's this particular program is about scientific research, and a lot of it was about mind control. Discovering how they could change the mind of people in order to turn them into individuals who carried no compassion, so that they could kill, so that they can torture. So they would take many kids, and they took adults as well, but the people that came to me were children and teenagers. But these kids, some of them were tortured in the sense of visual overstimulation, being forced to view sexual images, violent images, where, they would have multiple screens in front of them, and they were forced to watch these. They would be given drugs, and then auditory stimulation, where the auditory was so debilitating that it was painful. And then also the torture, where they were forced to torture animals. And the way that they did that, at least in the cases that these kids came and spoke with me about, they would starve the kids. Or they would torture the kids with water in order, like drown them, put them underneath water and make them feel like they're drowning. So that type of torture were the two examples that were offered to me.
Well, that torture works pretty good, because the CIA was noted for doing that pretty much.
Yeah, and then, some of the kids broke and tortured the animal out of, their own survival, and some of the kids didn't, and they died as a result. But MK Ultra is all about scientific experimentation on humans that is non-consensual. There is no consent given. There is no knowledge given of the experiments. So, anyone can research it. They can Google it. It's still up there online. I recently looked at the CIA's website, and they don't have it listed anymore. But what they do have listed on their website is remote viewing, where they trained individuals to essentially project their mental body in order to view events that are going on that are way outside their physical body. So remote viewing, if that makes sense.
Yes, it sure does. Wow. I didn't know a lot of this stuff was going on. And I thought, like, remote viewing with the government all was disbanded about 15 years ago.
They say that it ended on their website. I mean, when they reference it on their website, it's, in the past. But when two other women and I started taking trips, we started off in Montauk, New York, which is Camp Hero, the deactivated Air Force station. And then we went to some other locations after that. I started seeing these non-physical men who were angry and trying to stop these kids from reaching out and crossing over. And I came to learn that they were not deceased men. They were actually men doing remote viewing. So they were fully alive government men doing remote viewing. Now, when we were in Mount Shasta, another location we went to, which has some stuff going on underground, one of those men came to us in our hotel room, and he told us we needed to stop, that we were screwing up a quota, that we didn't know what we were doing, and that we would be interfered with.
They say what could happen to you if you kept, poking into it? Do they threaten you in any way with bodily harm or anything like that?
No, he did not get specific, but it was after that certain things started happening that I do write about in my book, Silent Whispers. But when I'm not an easy person to scare. So first of all, it wasn't a physical it wasn't a person knocking on our door, but a remote viewing person. And so I'm just, I'm listening to him talking to us, and I'm repeating everything to